And with me on the program this morning, the Shadow Environment Minister Greg Hunt and the Minister for Small Business, Housing and Homelessness, Brendan O'Connor. Gentlemen, good to see you. Brendan, Labor edge is up, second boost in a month. Are you encouraged by that? Still pretty low, but is it encouraging?
I'm not going to start going to analyse polls. I've never done that and won't do them now, but I make a number of observations. I do believe it's true that if you are constantly negative, as Tony Abbott is, if you're focusing on the wrong issues, if you're not developing policies for the nation, then you get marked down. And I think that's, you know, we've had a very important budget for this country, returning to surplus, providing benefits to pensioners, taxpayers, getting cuts from the 1st of July. These are important things. These are the things that matter to Australians. And I think there's no doubt, as a neighbour said to me, you know, persecuting a parliamentarian, using the parliament's no replacement for good policy.
Labor's still very dire, though, isn't it? As one Labor MP said to me at the last year's poll, that the problem for you guys at the moment is that your expectations are so low that even if the number's dire, it looks good.
I want no illusion, and that's why I'm saying you suggest that I should be pleased. I'm a realist. I know that we've got some challenging times, but we are looking to introduce into this country some significant reforms for the benefit of all Australians. Our focus is on those issues, and we know when reformist governments embark on those major changes, it is challenging. We're going through those difficult periods now, but we believe that's in the right interests of this country, and ultimately we will be vindicated.
Despite the Coalition's enormous lead, Tony Abbott's approval rating is at a record low. How do you reconcile that?
Well, the first thing is something tells me that they probably won't be high-fiving in the Labor caucus today, that this result, which many are championing as a tremendous comeback, would still lead to the worst defeat since Whitlam of any party in the federal government in the last 35 years in Australia. The second thing is that we are getting on with the business of building the alternative government as well as holding this government to account. So a blueprint for Australia, 5 great national plans. That's the task. We hold the government to account, and obviously their high water mark is everybody else's low water mark, and at the same time build out that alternate picture of a blueprint for Australia based on this idea of giving people a sense of hope and of opportunity and of capacity to do things through simplification. And that's what we're doing now, and that's what we'll do a lot more of over the next months.
The debate's been acrimonious, though. You'd have to concede that. Do you think that part of it has backfired on the opposition leader personally?
Look, I respectfully don't accept that. Let me say this. The Parliamentary Compact is about Parliament working when parliamentarians can express their views freely and without fear. That's why there is parliamentary privilege. But it fails when that privilege is abused. So let's take everything that's outside of the Parliament and forget it. What the last week was about is enabling the Parliament to function on that compact, the higher ideal that you cannot, as a Member of Parliament, mislead the Parliament, and you cannot, as a Member of Parliament, use the Parliament without profound evidence to traduce, denounce and destroy the reputations of others. And if you don't protect those as parliamentarians, you help erode the institution.
I don't think, but on the specifics of Tony Abbott's personal approval rating hitting a record low, disapproval record high, it just seems incongruous with a party that is so dominant at the moment in terms of your primary vote. As you mentioned, it would be a win of enormous proportions, but Tony Abbott's not getting the same credit. Why is that?
Look, we are in the process of holding the government to account, and that is a challenging task. But let's be absolutely clear here that the country appears to have lost confidence in the ALP, the country appears to have lost confidence in the Prime Minister, and beyond that, our task is right now to help build the sense of the alternate Australia, which can be a significantly better version of Australia than the one which is currently being delivered.
I want to play a little bit of Martin O'Shannessy, the news poll chief, when it comes to the Labor primary vote. He says it's far too early to say it's any sort of a trend. Let's hear him on that.
At the end of last year, they fell to 26 and recovered. They've now gone down to 27 and recovered. Perhaps it is the beginning of a trend. Certainly too early to tell. And at 32, if we'd gone to 32, and when we did go to 32, it was regarded as quite disastrous. So, it's still a very bad position to be in. But 5 points in the last month could be seen as the beginning of a trend, and we need to do that twice more for the government to be in a position to reclaim government in their own right.
Will this start or potential start of a trend? It's too early to say, as Martin said there. Will it be enough to give the Prime Minister some breathing space on the leadership?
Well, I think for the government, as I've just earlier acknowledged, we've gone through some very difficult times, and reform is very difficult, particularly fundamental reform, and we've got the most negative opposition leader in our history, I believe. But I think from the 1st of July, the scare campaign that's been waged by the opposition will fall away. The facts will reveal themselves, and the allegations and the wild assertions that have been made in relation to the impacts of pricing carbon will be shown to be the falsity that they are. I think that certainly will be something that will be well received by the public, to get the facts, to know that the benefits are there, to be compensated for the reforms, and to realise that the fact that Whyalla was supposed to be wiped off the face of the earth, according to Tony Abbott. Of course, that is a thriving community and will continue to thrive. The mining sector is booming. We have $500 billion of investment in the pipeline. We have the lowest unemployment, one of the lowest debts, 800,000 jobs, contained inflation. We've got the best economic indicators. We've got good growth, and I think those things will come to the fore. But we always understood, but when you embark upon fundamental reform, Kieran, you really do have challenges, and I think that is going to ease as we go forward.
That's obviously the government's hope, that the payments that started yesterday, in fact, those pension increases which kicked in yesterday, quite significant one-off payments, and they will continue through an increase in the pension when the carbon tax kicks in. Are you at least slightly worried that that's going to placate some of the concerns that have been fostered by the opposition?
No, I think that at the moment what you've got from the government, sadly, is denial and division. We see the division breaking out between the Prime Minister and her ministers over a decision last week in relation to the Roy Hill mine, and the denial is about the impact and the nature of the carbon tax. Last week we saw 344 jobs go at Kurri Kurri, which is an aluminium smelter in the Hunter, right next door to Greg Combet's own electorate. The company itself cited the combination of short-term factors against the long-term issue of electricity prices and the carbon tax.
Oh, that's not true.
No, the company, I've got their press release here, there's no question.
The
they said
factor for why they
factors
closed
including increasing energy costs and the carbon
tax. This is
tax.
the scare campaign I'm talking about.
When the company says it's the carbon tax, maybe we should take them at their word. Now, beyond that,
I think you're verbally
what we're also...
I'll come back to Brendan in a
I read
moment.
their own release.
Yeah, sure.
What we've also got is 104 councils around Australia that have just received show cause letters from the Clean Energy Regulator as to why they shouldn't be paying a carbon tax on landfill. 3 of them surround your own electorate. We've got the Macedon Ranges, we've got Hume Shire and Wyndham City Council immediately to your south in the Prime Minister's electorate, which has budgeted for $13 million of carbon tax liability on their landfill. That one council. So that's just surrounding Brendan's own electorate. 3 councils, all about to be hit. And that's the reality of the 1st of July.
There is no
your response, but what this does show you, what this does show to you, though, is that the coalition on all sorts of fronts can go at you on the carbon price.
They will seek
and that company did refer to the carbon tax in its news release.
Beyond that, but let me just, in terms of the contributing factors that led to its decision to close, which is a very disappointing decision for all of those workers, the primary and contributing reasons were not to do with pricing carbon, whatever other comments were made by that company. But of course we do expect the Leader of the Opposition to continue to attribute any loss of any job in this country to carbon, whether it's true or not. This leader of the opposition is so negative, he will attribute factors that are not, in fact, part of a reason for a company to make a decision to close. And we don't expect any change of his demeanour in that regard. But I think in the end the Australians will see through that. The Australian public will see through that and realise that we have to embark upon change to make sure we reduce our carbon emissions. And remember, Kieran, it's not about what we do and nothing. It's about whether we take this approach, market-based approach that Greg used to support, or whether we support the leader of the opposition's approach to imposing $1,300 of taxes upon each household per annum to pay for the big polluters to change, restructure their companies.
All right.
That's not the best
That is,
approach.
of course, false.
Well,
but-
we've got to take a quick break. Apologies, we've got a break in there and take a quick break on AM Agenda. We'll be right back and we'll have the latest on this this tragedy in Doha. We'll be crossing live to Auckland for the New Zealand Prime Minister's comments on that, so stay with us. So let's move on for the moment and talk about our domestic politics and the Enterprise Migration Agreement, which has been the focus of much debate here. Brendan O'Connor. There's a bit of division in government ranks, isn't there, as to going ahead with this. The Prime Minister seemed to struggle yesterday in saying that she actually supported the Reinhardt deal.
I didn't see that. I saw her articulate her support for the approach to ensure that the major projects in the mining sector are facilitated, provided that Australian workers are given first option for those jobs.
It took her 1 hour to say she backed the deal.
Well, she was asked questions. She outlined all of the benefits that flowed from those. What the opposition wanted was a yes or no. They think that she's in the dock. Well, she's not. She's in the Parliament. She's the Prime Minister. She's asked a question about the benefits of the arrangement under the schemes that this government's actually determined some time ago. And the Royal Hill project is a huge project, providing almost 7,000 jobs for Australians. And of course, there are up to 1,700 places for overseas workers if they cannot be filled by Australian workers.
But
I
I don't understand why, if the Prime Minister did indeed think it's a good idea, that it took her 1 hour.
Well, firstly,
6 questions to
support,
say yes.
Well, because you don't just get to say yes or no, you get to articulate your view. And I think it's fair to say, when it comes to this issue, this is a clear issue where it confuses the opposition that we can oppose Gina Rinehart on one matter and support her on another. Well, let me tell you this, Kieran. We'll support something that Gina Rinehart puts forward when it's in the national interest. When she opposes the MRRT, the Minerals Resources Rent Tax, we'll stand her up because the MRRT is in the national interest and it may not be in Gina Rinehart's. But when her interest and the national interest coincide, as is the case with the Royal Hill project, we'll do that. But what we've said, what the Prime Minister wanted to ensure, was that Australians get first option of the jobs, and that's fair enough.
Greg Hunt, the opposition has said that you support the idea but not willing to give the government the tick of approval on this one. Is it just all about the politics?
No, look, we have strong support in principle for the concept of where you can't find Australian workers, it's appropriate to have these enterprise migration agreements. We are absolutely clear on that. What is interesting here is it's almost as if even if the government gets it right, the Prime Minister gets it wrong. What's at the heart of this issue at the moment? It's not so much the agreement, because it's about 8,000 jobs, of which at least 6,300 are for Australians and hopefully a large proportion of the other 1,700. But it is about the fact that when confronted with the issue, the Prime Minister told the unions she was furious and she didn't know about it. So that's about an instinctive capacity to mislead under pressure. And that's the flaw at the heart of the current Prime Minister. You've got to be elevated. You've got to take the difficult decisions and take responsibility, and those genes appear to be missing.
The Prime Minister does want to say that there's going to be greater oversight of this agreement. She's trying she's obviously trying to placate the unions and some of her own MPs, and she's going to have to do that in the caucus today.
And everything that Greg just predicated those remarks on were based on private meetings that no one has been privy to other than the people in those rooms. But I understand that happens, assertion upon assertion, and then determine it as a fact. The fact is we have a caucus meeting.
So we're going to see more red tape?
Well, no, what we're going to have is we're going to have a facilitation to expand the mining sector as we should, but we're going to have regard to jobs. Labor governments put the interests of Australian workers first. That's not the case with the opposition when they were in government, in my view. And of course, yeah, look, this has been a bit messy, but you know what? We're pretty passionate about jobs. And if others, Senator Cameron said he was self-described zombie in the Parliament before. Well, he's expressed a concern. His concerns are legitimate. I believe the caucus will resolve this to ensure that there is proper oversight for Australian workers.
Who overstepped the mark then? If it's been a bit messy, was it Chris Bowen and Martin Ferguson that went too far instead of saying, OK, we've got to consult with the Prime Minister properly? Is that what happened?
I think certainly the logistics could have been handled better about how it was announced. There's no doubt about that. But you know what? Let's not romanticise governments. Sometimes things happen in a messy way. But is this good for the country? Yes. Should we have concern for Australian jobs? Yes. Are we putting over proper, effective oversight? Yes. Will there be a debate in the caucus? I'm sure there will be. But I think we'll reconcile those
the announcement was made by Chris Bowen, so therefore you're saying it was his fault, that he should have been...
look, I'm saying it could have been handled better by the government. It's not about apportioning blame, it's about... It could have been handled better, but you know what? This is a good initiative by the government, and fundamentally, will it mean more Australian workers will be in jobs? It will. Will the mining sector be able to expand? It will, but I think the biggest point to make is when we don't support a proposition by Gina Rinehart, we won't support it if it's not in the national interest. When it is, we will support it.
Let's just decode what Brendan said. To be fair, Brendan is, I think, a very decent guy. He's basically said that Chris Bowen, in making this announcement, undercut the Prime Minister. What did Chris Bowen do? He said it publicly. He said it on the day when the Prime Minister was meeting with the unions. And instinctively, the Prime Minister, in a difficult situation, denied the facts. We know from Parliament yesterday that the Prime Minister's office was briefed on the Monday and that she was briefed when she landed on the Wednesday. The Prime Minister, under pressure, simply denied the truth. And that goes to everything about this Prime Minister.
Again, another verbal.
When the decision is made, she denies it in a difficult situation. It's cause, effect, pattern, pathology, and it's unacceptable for a Prime Minister.
Did she drop one of her ministers in it as well?
I think the fact is that we've now determined a very important enterprise agreement, migration agreement, for a large project, which I think is a good thing. If we're going to have
Chris Bowen, he was not happy about it clearly yesterday in the Parliament, saying in front of the Prime Minister,
what he made clear...
We briefed your office specifically on Monday. Let's get that on the record, standing next to it.
That was in the Parliament. The point
I know, but what I'm saying is that he did that next to the Prime Minister.
And he went on to advance the interest...
And made a point very clearly, didn't he? And
made the point that it's in the interest of not only the mining sector, but of Australia generally, and the Prime Minister did the same. If you read, whatever else you want to take from this, Kieran, if you read the comments or listen to the comments of both the Prime Minister and Minister Bowen, and Minister Ferguson, they've all supported this approach.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry, Greg, just 10 seconds.
Okay. Yep. The government isn't divided. It's got a chasm running between two camps. It's absolutely clear and increasingly
Just watch out for Malcolm Turnbull.
We've got to go. Thank you, Brendan O'Connor, Greg Hunt. Good to see you both. That's all for AIM Agenda. Thank you for your company. We'll see you soon.